Hey everybody, it's your man James, Bit One Treasures, back again with some more video action for you. This is going to be another clip bit from some old live streams of mine. In fact, doing a little something special with this, I'm going to do like a sort of series of these that are going to like sort of have a thread that goes through them all. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to make them a little more interesting that way. So we'll see how that works out. We'll see if this little experiment goes anywhere. But today we're going to be talking, and this whole thread is going to be about how the leadership in the comics industry is really not in tune with the people and the whole situations of the actual dynamics that are going on within the industry itself. And so I figured if we're going to start off, we got to start off with where it all begins, which is of course with the numbers. And I'm going to show you here in this one how they distort the numbers and why. Some of why they distort those numbers. And so I think it's a very good place to start on this little saga. And so I hope you enjoy it as it rolls down. And I guess I have more of these coming up over the next week or so. So just keep your eyes out for that. And like I said, it's going to be some good stuff. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I really had a lot of fun trying to put this together for you. So I really hope you get something out of it. And I will be back soon with some more stuff. And so until next time, take care. Windmills by Brian Hibbs, a very well-known comic retailer, and he's talking about the book scan numbers from 2023, and it says comic sales sag, but Scholastics was still a powerhouse. So right there, it's telling you. See, this is the first bit right here. We're going to get into some stuff where they're actually kind of telling you some truth about what's going on inside the comic industry. Stuff that you know that they've been denying for years. They keep throwing up that famous ICV2 poll, with the 2.2 billion comics are doing great. They're doing better than ever. And now we're starting to see that because how things are going. And you've seen this in the news media. You've seen it in video games. You're seeing it in the film industry. And you're seeing it in the comic industry. The numbers aren't adding up. All they're champing at the bit, all they're trying to fudge the numbers isn't working, because in the end, you can only get away with that for so long. And then the numbers are going to come crashing down you. And that's what we're going to start seeing here at the start right here, is how the realities that a lot of us have talked about and that I've talked about in past episodes of sequential thinking, and others you've seen all over the internet talked about, they're coming true. We warned them this was coming, and they kept just pushing us off. You're a conspiracy theorist. You're a bunch of bigots. Shut up. Comics are doing great. And now we're seeing that the chickens are truly coming home to roost. So he starts out here. There are three kinds of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. Dogman number 11 was the best-selling graphic novel in North America in 2023, with more than 1 million units sold. As the graphic novels market in the U.S. sagged from pandemic highs, the units were down nearly 20% from 2022, but it was still the third biggest year for sales ever since we started doing yearly analysis of BookScan sales charts. So here they are. Even here, they're trying to spin it. Yeah, they're down, but that's because it's post-pandemic, and it's still the third biggest one since we've kept these numbers. And like, well, how long have we kept the numbers? I mean, if we've been keeping them for like 30 years, okay, maybe that sounds impressive. If you've only been doing it for 3 years, well, that's not so impressive, is it? Continuing, the big picture of the 44.7 million graphic novels sold via BookScan in 2023, nearly 21.8 million were manga, almost 49%. So take that into account right there. Half of all the graphic novels sold in the United States in 2023 through BookScan were manga. Kids comics were approximately 17 million copies, about 38%. And the remaining 5.9 million sold were primarily aimed at adults, around 13%. So that kind of gives you a breakdown here of, again, what we've talked about, manga's domination in the markets, both East and West. Nobody's reading the Western comics like they used to, but they seem to really all love manga. So this is just more, again, just keep these numbers in mind as we go through this. Scholastic is the biggest graphic novel publisher in the U.S. book market, and they have done it with massive hits. Scholastic is 39% of the market with only 596 different titles. In the top 750 alone, they sold a staggering 8.5 million copies of only 116 titles. So right now, again, they're championing at the bit for this whole thing with Scholastic. But again, Scholastic is not the mainstream comic industry. He's putting out these numbers to you. Hey, this is doing great. The manga is doing great, and this and that. But we still haven't really seen what's happening in the comic book industry. What's happening there? And then we get it. Marvel and DC combined are less than 10% of the book market. There you go. Right there. I mean, right there. I mean, you can almost say I could stop the stream right here. It's like, there it is. Manga, 50% of the books sold were manga. You know, Scholastics is doing great, but, you know, the mainstream, you know, direct market industry, less than 10%. I mean, but again, we knew this was coming. We told them this was coming. When adding up the top 750 sales of traditional direct market publishers, they combine for fewer than 750,000 books sold. 10% of what Scholastic sold. So there it is. Even against Scholastics, they're just a shadow. This is how bad off the industry is. Now you're starting to see the real numbers, you know, not the inflated bar graph they use. Oh, 2.2 billion, we're doing better than ever. Yeah, when you add in manga, when you add in Scholastics, when you add in, you know, stuff like Dogman, yeah, that then the numbers pump up. But when you're talking about the direct market, the direct mainstream American comic book market, which is what we all talk about. Whenever I say the comic industry, that's what we're talking about. They know that, we know that, everybody knows that. And what are they doing? 750 books sold, 10% of Scholastic. They're only 10% of the entire book market. Manga's eating their lunch. All the stuff we told them, all the stuff I've said for years, all the stuff you guys have heard for years from people like me. It's all right here. Depending on your exact definition of intended audiences, it appears that 16 of the top 20 is intended for children or middle readers. Another five of the top 20, 2 are manga. And if you are looking for a Marvel DC superhero comic that was generated for the direct market, you are looking at Watchmen, coming in at item number 305 for about 24,000 sold. Watchmen, nearly a 40-year-old series, it's 4 decades old, and that's the best that gets into you know, the list is Watchmen. You know, I mean, like I said, as I was reading all this stuff from Brian Hibbs, I just kept, you know, just nodding my head, going, "Yeah, we told you. Yeah, we said this was coming. Yeah, yeah." You know, there's like no shock over here. I mean, you see the way he's writing this, it's almost like he's kind of like almost shocked that he has to say this stuff, and yet, you know, and again, any of us who've been paying attention, we all know this was pretty much destined. As for Marvel, their very first appearance isn't until way down at number 557 with Spider-Punk, about 12,000 copies. There are higher placing superheroes, for example. Teen Titans Robin debuts at 194, which is an original graphic novel. Only Miles Morales' Shockwaves from Scholastic had a great sophomore year, coming in at 197, placing both of those in the 30K band. But neither Marvel nor DC appear to be having much meaningful traction with pretty much anything they are publishing as contemporary periodicals. So basically what that means is almost anything they're doing that's the new stuff, nobody's interested. You know, you got to go back 40 years to Watchmen to find something that people are willing to buy. And again, I've shown you in past streams, you know, where I've shown you like monthly totals of stuff. And you see it's all dominated by manga. And then when we cut down to the subgenre of you know, superhero graphic novels, what do you see? You see Watchmen. You see, you know, the Killing Joke. You see, you know, Batman Year One. You know, stuff like this. It's like 30, 40, 50-year-old stuff. It's not the new stuff. You know, where's all the new stuff? Where are all the great new classics that we're all going to love and enjoy in 20 or 30 years? You know, the way we do a Watchmen, the way you do a Killing Joke. Where are those classics today? And this tells you there are none. The last 10 to 15 years is just a barren wasteland of garbage. And this right here is all the proof you really need to spotlight that. I mean, I guess you could, but again, like I said, it just depends on who, you know, on their mindset. Because if they're not of the right mindset, all your knowledge will fall on deaf ears. And now we're going to get a little more into, you know, the numbers here of how they're performing overall. And he goes, if we look at the entirety of all Circana BookScan reported numbers for the total of 38,597 distinct Western comics, things look generally like this. There are 2,158 publisher imprints listed in the 2023 chart, but only 13 of them managed to capture 1% or more of the market. And as we look at this, you know, there it is. He said Scholastics is far and away, you know, Penguin Random House, HarperCollins. Here's DC Comics, 5%. Marvel, 4%. Dark Horse, 3%. IDW, 3%. Image, 3%. I mean, you can see how tiny the mainstream is. And even when you pull them all together, you know, 5, 9, and 9, 18, you know, it's barely getting past Penguin Random House. And even that, it can't touch Scholastic. Scholastic is still, it's more than double all the mainstream added together. This is how bad things are. He goes, this is not quite as lopsided as the manga chart, but it is still a bit overwhelming that one publisher is 39% of all graphic novels sold. And note that Marvel and DC combined are under 10% in the book market. And there you go. There it is. This is it. So whenever in the future they drag out that IVC2 bar graph saying, look, 2.2 billion, better than ever, comics are doing great. grab a copy of this, folks. Screen cap it, whatever you got to do. Get a copy of this like I have, and then throw this one out and go, no, this is actually what's going on, my friend. This is actually what's going on. This is the counter to all their nonsense. So for the good news, they at least placed a single book in the top 750. Hooray! But this seems paltry when you see that at least 4 other publishers licensed to Marvel Comics, Viz with Manga Spider-Man, Disney with Spidey and His Amazing Friends, Scholastic with Miles Morales Shockwave, and Abrams with Spider-Man Animals Assemble, beat every single comic Marvel itself published, while Penguin's reprint of Penguin Classics Amazing Spider-Man at 9,822 beat them all except for Marvel's #1 bestseller. So again, there it is. Even people who are doing a Marvel character that are not Marvel producing it themselves are doing better than Marvel does. Which, again, just goes to something else we always said, is we need to get these creations in the hands of people who care, of people who actually want to see these creations succeed. And you can see there are those out there, evidently, who do want that to happen. It's just not Marvel. If nearly everyone can do better than you selling your characters, it makes one wonder why you're still in the publishing business. Even more so, Marvel's bookstore distribution switched from Hachette to Penguin Random House on April 1st of 2022. So they've had nearly a year to see if new distribution could change their trajectory, and it's very, very hard to say that it is. So there it is. Again, something we've all been talking about. It's been buzzing in the background. How long before the mainstream publishers stop being publishers and they just license out the characters to someone else to do them? Now let IDW, let Viz, let them produce the comics. We'll just hold the licensing and the IPs, and we'll get our money, and they can do all the hard work of like getting creators and paying them and setting up a publishing house and blah blah blah. How long? I mean, this tells you it's coming. It's coming. I don't see a way around it. The Marvel comics that you and I grew up with, the DC comics you and I grew up with, they're not going to be around. 10, 20 years from now, they're not going to be around. They're going to be licensed out to somebody else because the companies are going to, the big parent companies, Disney and Warner Discovery, or whoever owns them at the time, they're all going to look at this and go, this is just a loss leader. This is losing money. And with how bad everything is across the board, again, movies, theme parks, video games, all these different entertainment, outlets are all hurting right now. I mean, you see it in the news all the time. This company let this many people go, and that company let that many people go, and all the corporations are now looking for things to cut. They're looking for things to get rid of. And this here tells you that, it's how long do you think the publishing arm of Marvel and DC Comics have, given this kind of a performance? But I thought this was good. Here on Bleeding Fool, in sort of like condensing a lot of stuff into one little bit here. They talk about the lies and distortions in the business of comic books, and talks about the state of the hobby. And it goes, tragically, the history of comic books can't be told without including its ever-diminishing sales numbers. While the specific numbers are difficult to obtain, something even Dan Buckley admitted to, it's not a secret, and websites such as Comicron have made a valiant effort to try to keep track of the numbers. When the industry started in the late 30s and 40s, it was not unusual for individual comic titles to sell millions of copies each month. Remember what I said about when they said female readers were there too? As time went on, these numbers started to decline to where today a title selling 100,000 copies is a big deal. A monthly title selling over 50,000 actually gets you in the top 10 in many cases. The aggregate annual numbers include the sale of trade paperbacks, and this also presents an inflated picture. Exactly. Like I said, they've been cooking the books and fudging the numbers for years. And now, as you saw with Brian Hibbs' story, him talking about those numbers, it's all coming home to roost. You can finesse those numbers all you want, but it's not going to change the reality. It's all going to come due. The check will come someday. You can push it off for a little while, but it's going to come due. And that's about where we are now. And this is again one of the distortions. Again, we just saw it, including manga and children books in comic sales. There's no question manga is extremely popular and sells really well in both comic and bookstores, as do many cartoon-styled books targeted toward children, such as Dogman. But let's be clear, manga buyers are a different group than traditional comic book buyers. The same is true for kids' books. Each product is bought for different yet very specific reasons. While Japanese manga and North American comics share a fundamental similarity, that is, they are images drawn in a sequential format, that is where the similarities end. I know of no comic book collectors who also collect manga. I'm sure they're out there, but I've never seen them. And I haven't either. Even in my days when I was working at the shops. And I remember the first the Amera manga wave in the mid to late 90s. when it got like popular for a second with Shonen Jump and things like that. The people who came in and bought that stuff, they never touched the Marvel and DC or Dark Horse or anybody else. Nope, they came in to get that, and that was it. I'm here to get my manga. They got their manga, they left. They didn't, I could say, hey, did you check out the new Spider-Man? Like, nah, it's okay. I'm not into that. So this is absolutely true. This is the problem. This is the problem. They're targeting people who aren't interested in what they're producing. People who read manga, people who read stuff like Dogman, they're not interested in what Marvel and DC have to offer. So that's why you're seeing them try to alter everything. Let's make it more like manga. Let's make it more like Dogman. So you can think they'll attract those readers over. And all they're doing is turning away the readers they have. This has been the downward spiral of the last 10 years in 2 paragraphs. Targeting groups and demographics that have little or no interest in what you're producing, while turning away the one that does. Because they are different. They do not want the same thing. They do not look for the same things. Like I said, this is why they need to focus on making better quality stories that they used to make, like those types of stories. They need to have better quality with that, and then try to focus on things you do that others don't. Quit trying to compete with movies. Quit trying to compete with video games. Quit trying to compete with manga. You're never going to be those things. Stop trying. Do what you do. Do what you've always done. Make that work. That's the solution. A few years ago, the idea of including these 2 subcategories into the comic book hobby industry would have been considered strange and even questionable. Nonetheless, the industry decided to group these categories together. In my opinion, this was done for the sole purpose of inflating the sales figures and present a rosier picture of the industry, in spite of the reality that monthly comic book sales have been steadily declining. Ding, 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 ding. Hello? Who's been saying that? Who's been saying this is why those ICV2 Comic-Con bar graphs that they keep throwing out there is all a bunch of bull. When you dig down into what those numbers mean, what do you find out? Oh, yeah, kid stuff and manga is doing great. The mainstream comic book industry? Nope. Up until very recently, manga and children's books were not counted together and were seen as separate revenue streams in most comic book stores. It's only since the plummeting sales of traditional comic books that these products began being included in order to artificially inflate sales of what could be considered a comic book. Manga and children's books are categorized unto themselves, and their success is to be commended. Recently, Rob Salkowitz, the author of Comic-Con and the Business Model of Pop Culture, wrote an editorial on the ICV2 website addressing this very issue, and his observations are worth taking note of. Rob says, more than 15 years ago, in the Scholastic-led explosion of young reader graphic novels, it's worth asking if this is doing the wider industry any good, in the medium of comics much good. It's certainly not awesome for other publishers angling for younger readers who are getting ground into pace by Scholastic's total market dominance. But more fundamentally, we have come full circle from comics aren't just for kids anymore to comics seem to be just for grown-ups now to is anyone but kids reading graphic novels in big numbers? See, I already showed you that. Yes, there it is. So there it is. This is it. This is what has changed. This is what the problem is. And did you see Dan Buckley's little thing to Comics Pro? Did you see anything in there that addresses any of this? He had Kumbaya, let's try all make a great community, and you guys, you retailers are important to us, and we want to work with you. We want to work with the studios and coordinate. But where's he talking about this? Where was anything to talk about how manga is eating your lunch and keeping younger readers from ever checking any of your stuff out? He has no answer for this. Nobody in the industry has answers for something like this. This is why they don't say anything about it. This is why they hid the numbers for years. This is why as you know, our friend here says that they conglomerated all those numbers together to paint that rosy picture. 2.2 billion. We're doing better than ever. Comics are doing great. This is why they did that, because they know it's not good. And they wanted to lie. Lie to you, lie to me, and most of all, probably lie to themselves. But now we've reached a point that they can't lie anymore. They can't gaslight anymore. Here's where the problem lies. For the traditional comic book world to piggyback on the success of manga and children's books only hides the failings of the traditional comic book market. Ignoring that reality also prevents systemic problems in the comic book market from being identified and changes made. And there are plenty of failings to talk about. It's too easy to fool ourselves into thinking that everything is okay when it's not. That's why I would suggest including manga and other things like children's book, cartoon books, like Diary of a Wimpy Kid or Dogman, distorts the comic book world. Yes, yes. Could not have said it any better myself. This is exactly it. This is the problem that needs to be addressed. And you saw from Dan Buckley, he has nothing to say about this. There is nothing he has to address this. Jim Lee at the DC and Marie Javins, they have nothing to address this. Nobody is looking to address this. Mostly because they probably have no idea how to address it. But also because if they even try to address it, then they have to admit their own culpability in it. And the only thing worse for these types than for us to be right is for them to be wrong. And in this case, it's both. And they certainly can't have that.